Hello, Prestige heads, and welcome to another American Prestige Q&A. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the format, American Prestige subscribers, which you can do right now at americanprestigepod.com, have the right, I guess, the
The right,
privilege,
the
I don't know,
duty,
the
the duty.
the obligation to join our Discord. And if you can't figure out how to do that, just drop us a line and we'll help you out with that.
The
And
Discord
once
is
you're in the
popping off, I
Discord,
do
the
have to
Discord
say.
is
It's really,
popping,
like,
yes,
active.
as they
Yeah,
say.
yeah. I participate, Derek doesn't, but I do, and it's
I'm
fun, and
too
Derek
old for
should.
Discord. But there is a room, a channel, I don't know what you call those things in Discord, where people can
A
ask
lair,
questions.
a dungeon.
Subscribers can ask questions of us, and we pick one question. Most weeks, we took last week off, it was a holiday week, but most weeks we pick one question and answer it here on YouTube. Also, you should subscribe to the YouTube channel, that helps us out as well. So that's how that goes. I also, I think, should probably plug a couple of other things. Welcome to the Crusades is still out there, available for purchase. The series that we did with the fine folks at We're Not So Different, Eleanor Yaniga and Luke Waters, it's still available for purchase at it's welcometothecrusades.com, right, Danny?
Yep.
Uh, you can go there, and it's $10 now, but still well worth the price, I think, for more than 10 hours of content. That's less than $1 an hour.
Well, more than 10
And
hours of content.
subscribers can to this show, or subscribers to Luke and Eleanor's show, if somehow you're listening to this, uh, can get still get a discount of 25% off the price of that.
I believe it's
Uh,
20%,
Oh,
Derek. I believe it's
20%. Sorry,
20%, yeah.
20%.
It's
Sorry,
okay.
sorry, sorry. I'm trying to get you guys a
Too
deal.
generous, too
Trying to
generous.
help you out. It's 20% off. 20% off. So there's that. And the other thing, the most recent announcement, is there's still time. You still have a couple of days to purchase the Robo Washington Crossing the Delaware poster. This is a new piece of art from Josh Lynch, the wonderful artist who did our original logo for American Prestige. He's now done more art for us. He's done the art for Blowback, many other things that you've seen and I'm sure liked have probably come from Josh Lynch. So check that out. It's at American Prestige Store, all one word.com. And subscribers get 50% off. I'm right about that. 50%
You
off
are.
one of those posters. So if you are a paid subscriber, it's definitely, there are perks that come with that. But it's a great piece of art. It's a lot of fun. And if you want to buy a poster, do that at americanprestigestore.com. So, Danny, the question this week from Stolen Velour, I like that name. Your conversation with Richard Beck had me curious as to why there aren't more connections drawn between Reagan and Trump, given they were both entertainers, not the first choice among GOP elite in their primaries, dogged believers in supply side tax cuts, etc. I would add both of them are sundowning while they're president. Why does this liberal set of thinkers seem to ignore this and focus on, as you said, smaller members of the conservative movement that are seemingly inconsequential?
I think that the reason is linked to what I talked about with Richard, which was that Uh, there's I think an interest to exceptionalize Trump, and I think that was the foundational thing that the liberal establishment has tried to do since he announced his candidacy for the presidency in 2015. They tried to basically say that Trump doesn't represent normal politics, that there was a consensus that was decided upon. I mean, you could put it broadly as a neoliberal imperialist consensus that both parties agreed upon in their general thrust. That whether you were Mitt Romney or whether you were Barack Obama, you were, for example, going to promote a form of free trade, or you were going to, at that time, prosecute the global war on terror. And that was basically the what's referred to as the Overton window. But really, just I think a better understanding is what's considered normal politics. And Trump, at least rhetorically, very much was not a normal politician. I think the biggest thing, particularly in that 2015, 2016 campaign, is when he insulted John McCain. And then he said that, what did he say? He prefers people who weren't shot down. And to me, that was such a normal, that was such an abnormal break in the discourse of American politics that people just didn't know what to do with it. And so there was this.
Danny, I would
Yeah,
I would add to
go.
that, just to jump in. The other abnormal thing that he did, there was a debate in the Republican primary that year where he teed off on Jeb for a good 5 minutes about the Iraq War and just what a disaster it
Right.
was, what a catastrophe it was. That to me, almost as much as, or even more maybe than him just gratuitously insulting John McCain, felt like this is a break. This is a turning point for
That was a
the party.
substantive disagreement, right? The McCain thing was just so off the reservation in terms of, rhetoric. Like, you just don't say that about a veteran, let alone a veteran like John McCain. And then the substantive disagreements came in the debate, which is the insult to and also George W. Bush, right? He went through Jeb to get to George W. Bush in the Iraq War and essentially called it stupid. And so I think that it's the break with normal politics that essentially has encouraged people to, probably everyone listening knows what I think about the fascism thing, but that was an artifact of that attempt to basically exceptionalize Trump. When I think, as you and I would say, like, the turn to these, like, basically fringe figures. I think most represented by Pat Buchanan. He wasn't quite a fringe figure. He obviously served in the Reagan administration, and he did have some sort of real basis in the GOP, or at least conservative intellectual circles. But to attach him to more fringier figures than I think one needs to explain Trump. I think that you could explain Trump as part of this larger GOP process, and I do think the best way to explain him personally is just sort of the New York City of the post-war period is a much more useful way to explain Trump than fascism or the Reconstruction era or Pat Buchanan. And obviously, there are significant antecedents within Republican and conservative intellectual circles that Trump obviously comes out of. He's still rhetorically different. He's also much funnier than any president. Is really unique. Like, no president. I was trying to think about it. No president has been as sort of funny as Trump. It's like, Derek. I'm sure you've seen on Twitter, like, images AI can never generate. Just the way Trump talks is so unique. His literal syntax and grammar is so unique that it's really, like, difficult to find an antecedent to that. And I think that really freaked a lot of people out. I mean, you look at someone like Jason Stanley in his book, I think it was called How Fascism Works. It's totally discursive and totally rhetorical, which is itself, again, a product. This might be getting a little in the little weeds. This sort of obsession with discourse and rhetoric is a product of this so-called linguistic turn, which took place in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s in the American Academy, which essentially really emphasized the importance about how language constructed reality, influenced by Wittgenstein and other philosophers of language. And obviously, as someone very much influenced by Marx, I think material reality matters in a causal sense much more than sort of rhetorical and discursive reality, even though if rhetoric and discourse do shape things. I'm not saying they don't, but I don't think they, for example, explain Trump. And so I think that is the major reason that people don't point to, I would argue, much more obvious antecedents. I mean, not even Reagan, George W. Bush. I mean, George W. Bush is, if you're thinking about everything that Trump is doing with ICE and Homeland Security and the defense budget, I mean, George W. Bush is right there. He's in the same political party. And regardless of what Trump said about Iraq, in a lot of the domestic security sense, he's very much influenced by that type of war on terror, existentialist rhetoric. It does seem like it's changing now. I believe Jamel Bowie in the New York Times recently had an op-ed that said something along the lines of Trump is just a normal Republican, which is actually what I've been saying for a fucking decade at this point. But I don't think I will receive credit for that, unfortunately, by the liberal crowd. But he is just basically an intensification of normal Republican politics. He is not outside the sphere of normal American politics. And I actually think you see that on everything from his foreign policy to his economics. Regardless of his populist rhetoric, he's basically just doing some random populist moves that essentially get overturned or don't really do anything because he's not attacking the core of neoliberalism, which is financial transactions across borders and conglomeration. The two key features of neoliberalization are financialization and conglomeration. None of these things, neither of those things is Trump attacking, and essentially he's just still governing like a neoliberal. And as we saw with the U.S. attacks on Iran and support for Israel, both in Iran and Gaza, he's basically just following a typical American foreign policy playbook. I do think, and Derek, you might disagree. I don't see, barring something very extreme, Trump sending boots on the ground. That seems to be like his red line in his mind. He wouldn't invade Iraq for sorry, Iran, for example. That seems unlikely. But he's doing the typical Obama type. You govern with you know drones and bullying and the protection of power and threats, which is just classic post 1945 American foreign policy. So yeah, I said a lot there, Derek, but I'll hand it off to you.
I mean, I think boots on the ground has become taboo, and I don't know that you're going to see that again until there's like a shooting war with another great power. Like, I don't know that you'll see uniformed American service personnel deployed to a war zone. You might get occupations, you might get humanitarian missions, things where they're deployed to other countries, but not in the middle of a shooting war. And I suspect instead we'll get mercenaries deployed because no, I mean, I don't want to say nobody cares about mercenaries, but it doesn't affect public opinion the same way as seeing service members get killed. To the extent that boots are even needed on the ground, I suspect you're going to see that sort of thing done more often than actual U.S. soldiers. Special forces, that's a gray area. That's a little different. But in terms of a mass deployment of forces, it's become taboo. I would note a couple of things. First of all, that the attempt to paint Trump as something wholly unique out of the blue uh, failed on its own merits in 2016, and it's fascinating that the Democrats didn't realize that when they lost that election, the most winnable election, I think even more than 2020 or 2024,
I think Kamala would have
most
won.
winnable election.
Only
Like
Hillary Clinton would have
seriously,
lost.
yeah,
Yeah.
like the attempt to paint him as not Republican, there's evidence that it gave people for whom the Republican Party brand was completely washed permission to vote for Donald Trump, to say, oh, well, he's not a regular Republican. I hate Republicans, but I don't have to hate Donald Trump because he's not a Republican. He's something different. And then they go and vote for him, and you get the 2016 election. And yet, having lived through that, they continue to do it. They continue to try and make him out as this wholly unique thing. And I think that another thing to consider here is the extent to which the Democratic Party has really become a small c conservative party. If it ever was anything else, it has and its leaders. And I know this generation of leaders, once the 120-year-olds shuffle off this mortal coil, maybe there will be some generational shift in attitude about this. But the Pelosi, Schumer, Steny Hoyer cadre of Democrats who lived through the Reagan years and lived through the 1990s and lived through the shift to center right politics by the Democratic Party, their gut instinct, their like reflexive need to absorb everything that's come before today, like this moment in time, as part of the Democratic Party legacy. Like, they grab on to Reagan. They were doing it during the first during the George W. Bush administration. They were looking back at Reagan and saying Reagan would agree with us. Like, this George W. Bush is so radical that Ronald Reagan wouldn't even have supported him. The Republican Party's gone so far off the deep end that Ronald Reagan now belongs to the Democrats. We own him now. We own his legacy. And it's partly true because the most effective Reaganite president in American history was not Ronald Reagan, it was Bill Clinton. But leaving that aside, there's just this reflexive need to grab for whatever the old Republican thing was and say, this is ours now, and you're different. You've done something so beyond the pale. They're doing it now with George W. Bush. They've been doing it since he gave that Werther's original to Michelle Obama. At the I don't even remember where that was. It was a funeral. Was it a funeral or something? And they're now grabbing at George W. Bush and saying, "Look, George W. Bush, he wasn't so bad. This guy who should be in a cell at The Hague as a war criminal, not so bad. Donald Trump is bad, but George W. Bush, he's okay. He would agree with us on a lot of stuff. He doesn't agree with Donald Trump." And it's really it's aggravating to watch, or at least it was aggravating to watch back when I cared about the political fortunes of the Democratic Party. The way that they just hollow out any semblance of ideology or belief or any kind of uh, uh, projection of like we have core values as a party. They step on that constantly to just take over whatever the Republican Party was 5 years ago, and that's adjusted constantly for whatever changes happen.
Yeah, and it's basically capitalism spirals. You're going to see it's the old Marxist quote, first is tragedy, then is farce. It just gets worse and worse and worse because there's no alternative offered. So what are you going to do? As things get pushed further, it's not even to the right; it's just further into the capitalist hellscape. There's just no way to really do anything, and I think you're going to see these types of degradations continue. And then maybe there's bright spots. Zoran Mamdani, obviously, perhaps being one. Maybe, as you said, when the boomers who are running for their 90th term in office at the age of 89, ill with various diseases, once they finally die, if they ever do, things might change, and things will change. But the degree to which they will change, I think, is an open question. And I guess all we can do is really try to push it in a positive direction.
I would just close. The last thing I would say is I do want to mention, and somebody replied with this in the Discord, but I think we should note Matt Christman's trenchant observation about the big difference between Reagan and Trump, which is Reagan was an actor; he was a puppet who said whatever he needed to say or whatever he was told to say at any given time. And Trump is the classic wild card who just spouts whatever comes off the top of his head, which increasingly is empty because his brain is dying. But still, that I think is a major difference. Reagan stuck to the script, and Trump frequently deviates from it.
Well, Derek, I think on that note, thank you everyone for listening. We love you all. And as always, keep on rocking in the free world. Bye.
Let's